Hi, I'm Frank Eaton. I'm Frank's oldest boy. Good to see all the faces here that I haven't seen in so many years. Many people that meant a lot to Dad. And this is my brother George.
Yes, the middle boy. Share with you.
Are we too loud?
No.
Okay, good.
More? Okay, perfect. Yeah, I see a lot of folks out there who knew Dad and Mike Miller. Oh, yeah. Mike and Dad played music together.
We were asked to talk about our father and the center and what our remembrances are. And I have to say that from my point of view, I don't have a lot of stories to tell. I have a few, but not a lot, because to me the important part of the center and my growing up were you people. Because whenever someone would come to the center, Dad being the caretaker, he had a tendency to ask people to come over to the house and have supper. And that was a great experience for me, to have so many people come and visit. Growing up here in the South, I didn't grow up. I didn't grow up the way normally a Southern person would grow up, because my mother being Southern Baptist and my father being a follower of Mayor Baba, I was kind of straddling the fence. But I got to meet so many people from all over the world, Australia, New York, obviously, because Gene and Darwin were instrumental in getting Dad to follow Baba, Gene and Darwin Shaw. But, and even though I worked in the center for a year when I was in school, in the 6th grade, I still have very few memories of the things that went on, other than Miss Kitty's smiling face. She was always smiling. And Eileen Coates, who my family dearly loved, and all the other people that we met, Walter and Andy Lesnick and the Hayes and everyone, David. Can't even begin to say how many people here that were dear to the family. So I'm going to let George start off with maybe a couple of stories, and then I'll bounce off of him, if that's okay.
Sure. Anything for you, brother. Frank pretty much said it all. Yes, we had quite a diverse upbringing. Of course, most of you have noticed my striking Southern accent, because I kind of leaned that way in my early days. But yes, it was a mixture, because there's this wonderful jazz music, and my dad loved that, and having the experience and being exposed to all this religious dogma and all this Baba people. There's so many talents and so many just wonderful people, and so it expanded my mind. At the time when I was young, I didn't really think about it. I just felt weird. So I tried to distance myself from that as much as possible. And it took a long time before I sort of made peace with how I feel inside and my things that I like. And I'm so grateful now that I had that experience. And of course, it took me years, but I finally did come to Baba, and I turned to him all the time for all of my needs. And I can tell you it's a great comfort. And what more can I say? I let him into my heart. And along with that, I let other people into my heart, and I try to be understanding, try to drop a lot of my ego and willfulness, which is very difficult. I saw my father struggle with that. I know he did for many years, especially with Elizabeth, because Elizabeth was so straightforward and illogical to my father many times. But he would do it. He may grumble and complain, but he would do that. I'm trying to think.
With the exceptions of maybe when he wasn't supposed to sneak off and go get a drink down at Watson. Or
Right.
something like that.
Walter told me that great story about how Walter had just come into the center, and he was all just full of this, Bubba, I'm here, and yes, I want to follow you to the nth degree. And here was my dad who'd been there for years, and he was just kind of, yeah, real easy and cool about everything. And in the middle of a hot summer day, he said to Walter and a couple of the fellas, well, let's go down to Watson's, get a cold Pepsi. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Walter's like, oh, gee, we really shouldn't do that, I don't think. And one of them said, well, shouldn't we let Elizabeth know, or should we clock off or something like that? And he was like, oh, no, let's just get in the car and go. So they got in the truck and rode down to Watson's store, which was like a mile from the center. And they go inside and get their cold Pepsis and whatnot, and they're standing there drinking the Pepsis, and suddenly, I think Walter saw Elizabeth drove up right out front.
Her timing was always impeccable, let me tell you.
Dad slammed the lid of the drink cooler down. That old lady always catches me, every time. Every time she gets me. And Walter's standing there, oh my God. Dad goes out there and he's now Elizabeth, I know we really shouldn't be here now, but I don't see anything wrong with a fella taking a break in the middle of the day and going having a cold drink. It's awfully hot outside, and on and on and on. And Elizabeth said, well, Frank, I have cold drinks over at Del Ruba. Come over there, but it's just not the same thing. You got to take a break and get out of here once in a while. It's different when you actually leave the grounds. And I don't know what the upshot was about that, but Walter, well, I'm sure it was very funny and very, very, very. They were very taken aback by my father's actions like that. But yes, he and Elizabeth had some hard times.
And my mother was no help when it came to my dad, because my dad was a very trusting soul.
Yes.
And my mother would tend to play tricks on him. Her favorite trick was finding a way to make him think that she had come into money. And if she knew it was April 1st, she would call him up in the center and say, Frank, you're not going to believe this, but we won the Publishers Clearing. You will never have to work again. Come on home. And he would, you got.
Call Elizabeth and tell her you quit.
Elizabeth, tell her you
quit. But she didn't answer the phone, thankfully.
Yes. But he came home, and then she just laughed at him. So he had to turn around and go back. Thank goodness Elizabeth didn't answer.
He was, I'm sure he was fuming about that.
Dad was very gullible.
Yeah, he was. He was a very trusting, loving person.
Yeah. May I tell the story about Nisi, or get it started anyway?
Sure, yeah, that's a great one. Yeah,
another time my mother had a friend, Nisi Jensen, who was a Bible follower, and also a famous actress,
yes.
A vaudeville actress. And Nisi and Mom, when they got together, oh my gosh, you had to beware of what was going on.
Yes, both formidable.
Very formidable people. Mom was going out of town. I forget why, but she was going to be gone a few days. Well, she cooked up this scheme with Nisi where she was going to tell Dad that Nisi was going to give her her car in exchange for a date with Dad.
Nisi was always flirting with Dad. She was, oh, Frankie, and all over him.
Yeah, Nisi was always on him. So, Mom goes out of town, and Dad spends the nights with the lights off, and Nisi coming up and knocking on the door. Frank, I know you're in there. Come on. Irene said you would go on a date with me.
Went on for about a week.
Yeah, about a week.
It was a prisoner in his own home.
Couldn't go anywhere. Had to leave the lights on. But Dad, George said it pretty well. Dad struggled with certain things, but it's interesting because the things that he struggled with are the things that he kind of taught us. and made an impression upon us growing up. Things like you don't need desire. If you have a desire, you need to drop it. You need to get rid of your wants. Everything else is supplied. And you need to be aware of yourself and your soul and those around you.
How your ego tricks you.
And not be tricked by the monkey mind. But in any case, that's the kind of things we learn. But he was often tricked by that. That was how Mom got him. And I think that's why he was bothered so much by Elizabeth. He would tend to do things. Another example that comes to mind is as much as he loved music and as much as he loved Baba in the center, he was told that he should not, no one was supposed to sit in Baba's chair in the barn. Baba's chair in the barn was off limits. You could go in the barn, you could meditate, but you didn't sit in Baba's chair. Well, when lunchtime came around, Dad would pull out his clarinet, and where would he go? He would go to the barn and sit in Baba's chair. Because to him, it was bringing him closer to Baba. To me, it was supplying his desire. But that's what it was.
Well, I suppose I should tell. I told this story to Carolyn Ball, but she wouldn't put it in the book. Washerwoman said, "No, you don't want to do that. Don't put that in there." She edited out quite a few things, but when I would come, nothing I like better than to come spend the night with my father, because in those days he was not only that worked there all day, he also was a night watchman. So he would do his day's work, he would come home and be with us, and then after we were all in bed, he would slip off to the center and spend the night in the caretaker's cabin and come back in the morning, and he would come in and make us breakfast, lay our clothes out. If it was winter time, he'd put them on the old oil heater, which we couldn't keep on all night because it cost too much. But that's how I'd wake up hearing him striking a match and lighting the heater. But anyway, there was this ritual we did when we got to the caretaker cabin when he took me in, and it was a great adventure there in the dark, with my dad, and I'm holding my pillow, I'm with my daddy, But we'd always park in front of the cabin on the hill, walk down there, and he'd always look over there off the steps to the left before he went in the door. And one time I finally did ask him, "Why do you do that?" And he said, "Oh, I killed a big chicken snake down there one time, making sure none of his relatives would come back." But we'd go in, and generally it was cooler weather, sometimes cold. So we'd get undressed. Dad slept in nothing but a t-shirt, and I don't remember what I had. But the little sink in the corner, he'd go and urinate in the sink. And then he'd say, "Come here," and he'd pick me up. I could put my knees on the edge, and he'd encourage me to do the same thing. And he'd turn on the water, and whip, "Don't tell anybody about it." Okay, so at some point, I was in there in the summer. I was out of school, and I do remember we were at the original kitchen, and he was raking around there the road and so forth, and he had the old Ford truck, and he had the trailer, which I think they're trying to rebuild now, a little green wooden sided trailer, and we'd throw the leaves in there. So I was raking, and went up towards the lagoon cabin, and I thought, "Oh, the door's open." The screen door was shut. That was it. The entrance facing the lake. So what do? I go in there and look around, and I'm like, "Oh, look, a little sink." So I'm like, "Okay, well, I can't get up there." So there's a piece of furniture. I think it's the same one by the door. I'm like, burn, dragging it over, and I'm starting to get up on there. Dad comes flying through the door. He must have. So, "What's going on in the lagoon cabin?" He comes flying over. He's like, "Oh, no. Drags me off. Puts the furniture back. It's like, "Get out of here. Go." He saved me from doing that. No telling what. Yeah.
Got caught.
So, yeah, it was really, really good. But he enjoyed humor. He loved a good joke, racy jokes, whatever. He always had a new one. But I enjoyed so much being with him there because it was so quiet and peaceful, and there was no community back then. The Winterfelds and Marshall Hay and his first wife, or I don't know which wife, but first may have been his 14th wife, I don't know, but they were the first. They were the first community that lived nearby, and that was like in 1970 or something.
And the Ots.
The Ots came. They came a little earlier. You're right, Frank.
The Ots
They came in like '67 or something like that.
Yep.
But yeah, I made $10 helping the movers move Marshall's stuff in his apartment down in Myrtle Beach. I've never seen so much money in my life. But But where was it? I forgot. Oh yeah, being at the center with Dad. It was very, very nice. So I had him all to myself. It was all very quiet. It was like we had this wonderful playground we could be on. It was like we were wealthy. We had this secluded place we could go and be because we'd use the beach during the weekends, and we had the whole beach to ourselves. That was really great. So.
Do you remember the story about him swimming in the ocean before?
Oh, I sure do.
Bombing range.
Yeah. Many don't know this, but all this land they're buying on the people are putting houses on over on the west side of the waterway was a bombing range. During World War II, they trained bomber pilots, and they would actually drop bombs over there. And down where the Pirate Land Campground is at Singleton's Wash, that was a gunnery range for the fighter planes, and there also was one down at Lakewood or Ocean Lakewood campground down in south end of town. But there were thousands of 50 caliber bullets and shells laying all over the beach. We'd pick them up and bring them home, and we had finally just got bored with them. But
Buckets of them.
Buckets full of them. But the point is that Dad says, we were just out of the blue one day, said to me, he says, oh yeah, I was taking a swim at Center Beach one time, and one of those planes came over the ocean.
Strafed him.
And he says, there's bullets like beep, 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 boom in the water. And I said, what did you do? He says, what do you think? I got the hell out of there.
Dad had a good sense of humor. One of the people that worked at the center when I was very, very young was Mr. Platt. And Mr. Platt was a carpenter, and he would come in and repair things or build things, as Kitty and Ms. Patterson said, for him to build. And he was deathly afraid of snakes. And Dad, one day they were out working, I think it was on the garage, and Mr. Platt was there working. Yeah, it could have been. And Mr. Platt saw a hole in the ground, and he thought, he says, I wonder if that's a snake hole. I've got to be careful of that. So Dad waited for his opportunity, Mr. Platt to be over glancing one more time in the hole as he was wanted to, and came up behind him and reached down and nipped him on the head, which Mr. Platt then flew up in the air.
Yeah. He was a little guy.
He was a very little guy. Yeah.
What a great carpenter.
He had to end up going and changing his clothes after that. Dad thought it was hilarious.
Yeah. Played a lot of tricks on him.
A lot of tricks.
That old Chevy pickup he had, they put one of those things that smoke and whistle and explode when you start the thing up. He was really upset about that too.
Love jokes and tricks. And I'm sure he played tricks on a few of you out there. But
see Walter nodding his head.
Yeah. Love to play his tricks. But overall, Dad approached the center in a very loving way. He could have been a famous musician. He could have worked. He worked for the school system as a band teacher and as a driver instructor for a couple of years. But his love was the center. And although financially we didn't get a lot of money and we were poor, that's what he wanted to do, and that's what he did. And fortunately, although my mother grumbled about it, my mother had some sharp words about Elizabeth and the center, overall, she supported him. So we would not have survived without the Chestnuts in the area, who consequently moved to this area because the bombing range was made, because they sold that property to the government, and then with the money that they got, they bought property here on the beach. So we wouldn't have survived. We grew up renting from the Chestnuts primarily, in a house that had originally been a gas station, a single pump gas station. And Dad would fix it up, he would work on it, and I think he learned a lot from Mr. Platt.
Oh, yeah, Platt.
But he built a bedroom on the one side for us, and then he built a big porch on the back so that he could practice his music with his friends, and they could come and sit on the porch and play music. Of course, in later years, it ended up as being Mom's poker den. As she worked at the Garfield restaurant, and as soon as 9 o'clock came around, she would head over off work when they closed the restaurant, and all the waitresses and kitchen staff would come over to the house and play poker on the back porch until 11 or 12 o'clock, which also bothered Dad, because Dad would have to get up and go in early in the morning or go to the center. Well, this may have been after he retired.
After he
It was
retired.
after he retired, actually, and he liked to get his sleep, though.
Yeah, he went to bed pretty much early all the time. He didn't vary that at all.
And he asked Mom occasionally, can you hold it down? Can you have him not come in the house? Just stay on the porch, you'll be fine. But the waitresses like to come in and get coffee, and of course nobody was going to tell them
They
no.
drank and smoked too. He didn't like that.
Yeah, smoked and drank in the house, which he didn't like much. So he set himself a trap. He liked to get up in the evening and fix himself a peanut butter sandwich. So he waited until the waitresses would come and they were playing cards, and then as they took a break and migrated into the kitchen and talking and clattering and laughing. As George mentioned, when Dad slept, he slept only in a t-shirt. So Dad waited for the right moment, walked out of the bedroom into the kitchen, opened the cabinet and reached to the top shelf
To get the
to
peanut
get the
butter.
peanut butter, which he had strategically placed there. And the waitresses were like, fixed himself a peanut butter sandwich, turned around, smiled at them. Needless to say, the coffee breaks did not occur after that. Mom got a big kick out of it.
Yeah, all that came to a screeching halt shortly after that. Then I remember Dad saying, "Geez, the fella can't even get himself a peanut butter sandwich around here."
Dad was a wonderful human being, though.
He was. He really was. Gosh, I'm sure I had the sweetest father on the planet, because, and our younger brother John, he had problems. They went undiagnosed for years because Dad said, "No, I'll love him and I'll take care of it. And I know he'll get better," but he never did. And in his younger years, as he was growing up, it manifested itself mostly in, constant talking, constant moving around. He was very hyperactive. He was very willful. And of course, my mother had more will than just about anyone. So if you didn't do what she told you to do, you would be in trouble. She was constantly punishing John and giving him a hard time and trying to get him to act right. Then when he became a teenager and started going around with his friends and he started using alcohol a bit, some drugs in, like a Jekyll and Hyde type thing. He would go out with his friends, and then 4, 5, 6, generally in the middle of the night, he would come home, and he was just totally changed. He was just angry, he was ranting, and he would kick things around the house, break things, and slam the door, or people he was with would just get tired of all this and just put him out on the side of the road. And Dad would go get him. He'd call, and Dad wouldn't say a word. He'd get up, put on his clothes, go get him, come back. Never Dad saying a word. You hear this Tasmanian devil in the background, you know, and then Dad would just come in and he'd go back in his room and he'd go to sleep. And don't even try to say anything to John, because he would jump on your case about it. But that went on for a long time. Drove my mother and most of us kind of half crazy, but Dad wouldn't let us do anything about it. She'd make appointments for him to see the doctor or whatever, and Dad would say, I'll take him, but he wouldn't take John. Or he'd come back and say, there was nothing wrong. But after he passed away, Mom said, I got to get this boy in here. So they found he was like level 4 or 5 bipolar. And the doctor said, you are so lucky, he's 28 years old. Most people would have killed themselves by now. Wow. In which he did try. I saw him stand over the trash can one night. He came in after Dad rescued him and reached up there and got a knife and went, and the blood just, I was like, holy God. And then Mom put tourniquet on both of his arms. Them both got him to the hospital and got him stitched up. But yeah, Dad never complained. He never judged, he never did anything. And I was the same way. If I was out somewhere and things weren't happening, you know, things weird or so forth was happening, you could call Dad. Oh yeah, I'll be right there to get you. And he'd come and get you and drive you home. You really shouldn't do that. You get in trouble one day doing that. But yeah, that's the kind of self-sacrificing person he was. He was very giving. And I don't know much about him because, geez, he was, what, 30, 34, 35? He was 38 or something when you were born, right? So I don't know what kind of struggles he went through in his younger years growing up.
The only thing I know is I know he was a seeker. I know from talking with and looking at documents with my grandmother and talking with Darwin and Jean that he was always a seeker. He had been very close in church with his Unitarian church with my grandmother, and then he learned about Rosicrucianism, and he got studied Rosicrucianism, and then he met Darwin, and Darwin got started on the path towards Baba, and he took to Baba like a duck to water. He was just ecstatic.
Yeah, he was in the early group of Narina on New York City. He would travel down there from Schenectady.
I have family movies of Darwin and Jean and their family, the two girls and the son, and myself and my sister, who's my half-sister, going to my grandmother's house or going out to the Lake George and stuff like that in New York, and wonderful times together. And then there are movies of people like John Bass, who was an early follower, and the Winterfelds, who were such incredible people.
Yes, they were. Fred was a crazy driver, though. My mother, I'll never ride with that man again. You go down the boulevard, and you have the old black 49 Chevrolet, and then one of those add-on turn signal things with the big lights, and the thing would tinka, 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 tinka. And I can remember being in the back seat, and Fred just talking 90 miles an hour, tinka, 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 yeah, back and forth. grandma better holding me against the seat. 'Cause, I'll never ride with that man again.
My grandfather was just as bad, so that's...
Yeah, he certainly was.
Anybody want to give a story? We don't... We'd love to have some stories.
What about Sam Lewis?
Pardon?
Did your
Sam,
father
he was
know
a,
Sam
he
Lewis?
was a Sufi, right? Early.
Yeah.
Early Sufi.
Dad never talked about that. I have a few pages of correspondence, I think is related to that Dad saved. But that's all I know about Sam.
Yeah, I don't know
Many
much
people
about
have asked, because something happened, I don't know what happened there, but
it. And there was a connection with Model Love down in Georgia, too, but
Yeah.
we don't really know much about it.
you know,
Yes?
Did he ever talk about, for example, the 3 incredible weeks, did he, when he went to India, or did he ever talk about when Baba came to the center?
Oh, yeah. We have a little bit of writings and stuff like that, but with your family, you don't tend to talk about things like that. You talk about it with your friends. We didn't discuss it at home. We had more discussions about UFOs and about hollow earth theory and Edgar Casey, as someone mentioned earlier, than we ever did with about Baba and the center. Yes?
I know in 1935, Darwin wrote to Baba and said there are some people here in Schenectady who would really like to start a center. And that, of course, didn't happen. But do you know if your father was one of those people?
He was not, no. It wasn't until he got out of the Army and came back and was the chauffeur for the mayor of Schenectady that he met Darwin, and I think that was in the early 40s.
Right, thanks.
well, we conjecture.
Yeah, but that's conjecture. But I
Yeah,
don't think
how
so.
they met and how they found out they were on the same interest, we
Same
don't know.
seekers.
Not sure.
Same seekers.
Yeah, but Darwin was his Baba connection.
Yeah, Darwin was definitely his Baba. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I have very fond memories of him from the center in the 60s, because there were no rules then about when you had to be in your cabin or anything like that. And he would come on at midnight, and we would have hot chocolate
Oh,
and talk about UFOs.
Yeah.
He was really into that.
He really was at the
Did
time.
Frank ever talk about how he felt the first moment he met Mayor Baba? Was that in '52?
I would say that's
Yeah, right.
probably
Physical.
52.
Did he ever speak
Yeah.
about
No,
his
he
first
never.
impression? No.
No, but I'm assuming that everybody knows that when he passed away in the hospital, that was his last words. Mayor Baba, Baba, Baba.
Baba.
I always felt such a sweet presence around him whenever I came to visit the center in the 60s and 70s. He was one of the people I really looked forward to just being around, because he exuded such a warmth and just as you're saying about him.
Yeah.
I felt it, not being...
He loved everyone.
Yeah, I could sense that, yeah.
Let's see, when I first came to work at the center, I guess he just retired. So then I took it on myself to go and meet him, because I don't think he came to the center hardly at all.
No, not
And
very
then,
often.
so I go to your house from time to time, and I see all of you and
Yep.
Irene. And then I remember, maybe I read something, and George, some time ago, I was trying to find that, maybe in a diary or something that he made. But he did say it out loud, and I have it right, that Frank said, would be in the 3 Incredible Weeks. So we took some notes from that.
Yeah.
And then he would have said, and here's my memory for that, as Baba said, there's never been an avatar as kind, as natural, as humorous as Baba.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're going to wrap it up. Oh, wait a minute, we got a few more. David?
Yeah, I first came to the center in 1971. That's where I met your dad. And Baba brought up some emotional issues for me while I was there. And I always remember how loving and compassionate your father was. It remains something in my heart that, just like what you were saying.
Thank you, David.
Mike,
I remember one time when I was finally able to pin him down, and as many times as I asked him, what was it like to be with Baba? And in between music, we were always talking music, or Edgar Casey, or the coming flood, and whatever conspiracy was, or disaster theory was happening. And finally, he did say, he said, being with Baba was like, Baba had the ability to instantly melt your heart, whereas it would take, without him, would take lifetimes to do something like that. Baba had the ability to do it instantaneously. That's all I got out of him.
Yeah, he didn't want to talk much. Many people wanted to come and talk to him, and he would disappear. He didn't want to share whatever it was.
But
But,
Irene didn't disappear. If I went to
Oh,
visit
no.
her, she'd talk, and we had a good time.
oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He would, yeah. Next thing you know, she'd be beating you at poker.
Trying to get you to play Scrabble
Yeah.
for money.
What did Frank do with that pyramid?
Oh, it stayed there until it finally rotted away. It was there after, let's see,
I think they tore it down.
they tore it
after.
down after she passed away.
Yeah.
I thought a saucer descended one night and then it's gone the next one.
That was probably Ducey deciding that the property
Yeah.
value would be a little higher if he moved it.
Were you talking about the space dome outside the house?
Yeah, the pyramid.
Pyramid, yeah.
The
Pyramid.
Yeah.
Pyramid, yeah.
That was another one of his things he
gosh.
delved into. He read somewhere that the pyramids were made to focus energy. So he was getting there and sitting there, but unfortunately he didn't think to ventilate it properly. So it was only
Got pretty hot in there.
2 weeks out of the year you could use the thing. And John used to bring dates home and take them in there.
Sex is going to be really incredible in here, let me tell you.
And Frank, bless his heart, he drew an Egyptian swing band on the side.
I
He
did.
was out there holding the baton and the saxes and the trumpets and all that. And the on every music stand.
And I think on the door I remember painting the Egyptian hieroglyphs that said, knock, knock, who's there? Your mommy.
So you see, that was our dad. He loved
it.
He loved humor, and he loved being light about things. But no, you could pry things out of him. He didn't want to talk about anything much. Not at all.
How many instruments did he play?
Anything you name. He could play the piano, the accordion, the clarinet, the saxophone. I don't think he played the trombone, but
No.
Violin.
he played the violin, which was, of course, what he was taught. He was a 10-year classical
So
violinist.
good on that.
He was wonderful on violin. He was second violin in the Long Bay Symphony when it first started.
When my father came to the center to visit, they both played together at one point.
Awesome.
No, that's
Yeah, on
interesting.
stage, I think.
And he
I've seen
loved to
it
play.
Yeah. Practice, practice, practice.
Yes, sir.
To talk about the 54 visits to India, the 2 incredible weeks your father was there.
But he-
Three.
But he didn't talk with us very much about it.
No.
I can remember him going, and I can remember him bringing me back an elephant made of a water buffalo horn and things like that, and small trinkets, which
Yeah.
I still have at the house. But we didn't talk much about it. Dad took me to the center when Baba was here, and my remembrance of it is Baba was sitting on the bench by the steps that go down to the boathouse at the kitchen. And he was doing his little candy trick of the prasad that he would throw to the children while he looked at a different direction. Well, I was wiry and skinny at that time, wiry and skinny and very fast. And as he would look this way, I was pretty sure he was going to throw that way. So I was poised and ready, and I would grab the candy before it reached whoever he was meaning for it to go to. And of course, Dad's standing behind me, watching me, and then Baba looks this way and throws this way, and I was grabbing. I probably got 4 or 5 pieces that way. And Baba was like, and says to Dad, "He's had enough." And my father, being my father, took that as a very good thing. And I did too. And it's true. I got so many blessings from the center and from Bob. It's true. But I don't think you can ever have enough. All right. Any more questions? Any more tales?
Well, I'd like to just make a comment or two, if I may.
Yes, please.
Frank's sense of humor was really incredible. And it flowed throughout his whole existence. And I remember, because Barbara's here in the audience, she'll remember this too. One day, when he came up to the place right next to the refectory we called the storage area there, he found one of these little, what do you call them? They just crawl around. Like a lizard.
Carolina
Banana.
They change colors, right? Green, brown.
Yeah, they're not big, they're pretty small little guys. Yeah, so anyway, he took this and then he got in the truck. So I'm right outside with him, and then he's starting to go down the truck. And then I looked around and I saw Frank put this right here on his ear, right on his earbud. And I said, "Frank, what are you doing?" He said, don't worry. And then he rushes on down to the original kitchen. He gets right in front of the original kitchen. And then Malcolm and Barbara were down there working. Barbara comes out, and Frank's looking around. And he said, "How you doing, Barbara?" Trying to egg shake his face around so she could see. And it took, I don't know how long, but it took a little while for Barbara to finally see that this little guy was right on his earlobe. And then of course Barbara said, "Oh, Frank, that's just you." And that's the kind of humor that Frank had. And also I'd like to say, his great love for music. He had an incredible love for music. The big band music, whatever it was. And you had mentioned trombone at one point. Well, when I first came to the center, once Frank knew that I played the trombone at one time, he insisted that I get one. And so I did. And I didn't know what in the world I would do with this, other than Frank was like a friend. So I would have done whatever I could for Frank. And I know he was like a genuine friend for all of us there. So I get this trombone, and as soon as I get it, he looks it over and all this. He put the order in for me. I assume I paid for it. And we got it. And then he said, "Well, we're going to play here down at Pine Lodge." I said, "Pine Lodge?" Yeah. At that time, at first, it was supposed to be in the library. In the library, I said, "Well, how can we do that?" He said, "It'll be fine, there'll be no one there, we'll just sneak in there and we'll play the trombone." So that's exactly what he did. And so I started to learn a little bit more about my own abilities to play, and Frank would be on, did he have a trumpet or something? I can't remember what he played.
Probably had a trumpet or a cornet or the saxophone.
Yeah, one of them. Because he had so many different instruments. And we went on and on for, some time with that. And then when I decided to give it up, after I got married later on in my life, and we opened Rainbow's End, which was a place down in Myrtle Beach where we took all of our belongings. There were the treasures and the giveaways for everyone else to take their treasures too. And that's how we supported CVS. So that's a whole nother story. But this time, when Frank knew that I had taken it down, someone must have mentioned it to him. He went right down and bought it.
I have it. Welcome to have it back.
I never knew what happened to it, but I thought of that when you had mentioned that.
Yeah, really, if you can have it.
I would never go back to the trunk going, please.
Take a lamp out.
But I think you should keep it for Frank's sake, if you ever decide.
Well, that was his great weakness, was musical instruments.
Yeah.
My mother would say, if he brings another one of them musical instruments in here, I'm gonna throw them out there.
We thought he was building the back bedroom for us, for the boys. Well, he built a closet on the back wall of it, which spanned the whole back wall and was 3 feet deep and had shelving on top of it above the doors so that Mom could not see that he had piled clarinets, saxophones, accordions, auto harps, you name it. They were all hidden away behind music up there.
How did your parents meet each other?
My mother was from Green Sea, and my mother was a waitress that waited at a place called the Cozy Corner. The Cozy Corner was owned by a Greek family, the Mashurists, who had 3 different restaurants in Myrtle Beach in the early 50s, even in the 40s. So my mom was waitressing, and Dad came in and got a cup of coffee and a sandwich or something on his day off and talked with her. Now, my mother was a beautiful woman and a flirt. She would engage you. But when she saw my dad, supposedly, she said to Mr. Mashur Sr., Mr. Chris, as he was called, that's the man I'm going to marry. She told him. And Dad did come back, but he would never ask her out on a date. Well,
They made a bet. Mom said, I'll bet you $10 I can get a date with him.
Yeah.
She got her $10.
Yeah, so he would keep coming back and talking with her, but he was very shy and wouldn't ask her out. So one day he's in there having his sandwich and coffee, and my mother's cousin comes driving up in a brand new convertible Cadillac. Comes in, and Mom immediately takes the opportunity to say, well, what was his name? Do you remember?
I don't.
Let's just say it was Charlie.
Yeah.
Well, Charlie, that is a beautiful car. When are you going to take me for a ride in that? I'd love to go out with you in that car. And Charlie, being her cousin and knowing how she is, said, Irene, you can go anytime you want. You want to let's go right now? Let me go back to the motel and get my stuff, and we'll go. I'll take you to Savannah. She says, I'm ready. I'll quit right now. You come back. So she gives Charlie whatever he had ordered, and Charlie goes and says, I'll see you in a little while, and takes off. And Dad's sitting there and perplexed about what he's going to do now. Because he likes this woman, but he's not been too forward. So he walks up to Mom and says, you're not going with him, are you? She says, sure, why not? He said, well, I think you should go with me. Mom says, okay. So Dad says, well, what are we going to do about this guy coming back? Oh, he's not coming back. That's my cousin. He knows.
And that was the beginning of it all. For years.
She was good.
Yeah. She could get the job done one way or the other.
You know, Irene, to me, was pure gold.
Yeah.
I know that she complained about the pain, rightfully so, she needed to, with everything going on. But when Laura Delavine died, she came right up to the house with no questions asked, brought her cleaning pail, everything, and spent hours in there cleaning the place up, knowing that people would come over.
She was a true friend. You were her friend? Or
Niecy Jensen, by the way, I mentioned Niecy Jensen earlier. Niecy Jensen did give Mom the car, her car, and bought a new one, and gave Mom that car, because that's how good a friendship they had.
Yeah.
George, did you meet Baba on the center?
Yes, in '58.
Any news?
I wasn't quite 3. It was during the children's Christmas party right there by the caretaker cabin. Dee Dee Eaton snapped a picture of me. Baba holding my face and giving me a kiss on my cheek. But I don't remember, because it was not a protracted time. You didn't get to spend a lot of time with him. It just, and away you went, because there was a big line. But he did give me a prasad, and I started to eat it, and Dad's like, no, let me. And I can remember walking around to the entrance side of the caretaker's cabin, going like this to my dad. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to give it to you." He took his pocket knife up and he broke it up because it was pretty large and he didn't want me to choke.
Hard candy.
Yeah, it was hard candy. So then he gives me a little piece, and I'm like, it was a lemon drop. I don't think any 3-year-olds was like a lemon drop. And Dad's like, no. Oh, God. So he ate it himself. That's what I remember.
You have a favorite caretaking story?
Mhm.
Caretaking story when he was...
There wasn't much excitement around my house, but occasionally there were things kind of exciting for a young boy when I'd be hanging out with Dad. And one night I went to stay with him, and that was all so nice. He'd open all those windows around there, and we'd get on the bed, and I remember he saying, "Now, get the sand off your feet," and we'd get up in there, and he had an electric blanket, and it was just like heavenly there to sleep, and you could hear the wind sighing through the trees, and then the ocean in the distance. But we got up one morning to leave, and stumbling out in the truck there by the cabin on the hill with my pillow, and we hear this I think somebody's hunting on Gator Lake. So we got in the truck and went down there, and then it wasn't a picnic table and all that, and shrubs under the trees and all. It was just a little narrow path that disappeared off of the road right in that curve. So he's like, "You wait in the truck." I'm sitting in the truck, and he goes, "Long time gone. I'm freezing." Finally, here he comes back. This guy and shotgun and ducks, and both of them are soaking wet. They got in the truck, and he said, "Well, sorry, I have to take you in. This is a sanctuary, state sanctuary, and there's no hunting here." And the guy's like, "Yeah, I know." So we took him up to Watson's and handed him over to Watson's. But the story was, Dad startled the guy, and he had on waders with the hip waders, and he jumps in the lake. So he was drowning. Dad got there to get him out. And he was probably drowning. So they were both freezing then.
Years ago, Adele and Virginia Rudd both told me, independent of each other, that Mayor Barber had revealed to Narina that the actual avatar tree was living on scent. It was somewhere on the 500 acres. Did any of this ever get to your father that you know of? Because both Adele and Virginia said they didn't know the actual location of the avatar tree, but Barbara assured Narina it actually was there at the time. I don't know if it's still living.
No, that being mentioned.
When Barbara said that the avatar is not just a man for all men in creation, but a pig for all pigs in creation, spectatus, sparrow. Apparently, I don't know if it's true for everything, it's actually, there is a actual avatar ant, an avatar pig, avatar tree, and Barbara said that it just so happens the avatar tree is living on the Barber Center.
Certainly.
Never heard of that.
I never heard.
You know what Frank's hardest job was, he told me once?
Yeah.
Is
Maybe.
making that telephone call to
Yeah.
Elizabeth.
I witnessed those. That was
So
funny.
have I. I've been in the cabinet.
Getting the
and he's
list.
holding the phone right up against his ear. "Oh, yes, Elizabeth, and I could do that, yes.
Yeah.
And we'll get that done too." "Okay, is that open? Okay, yes, we'll get that too." And he finally gets the phone down. And boy, he's just so relieved at that
Yeah,
point.
he was like staggering, like the original kitchen. Follow him in there every morning. He'd make that call.
Ladies first.
So Frank, you met Baba 3 times then? You met him
Twice.
twice? What was you told us a little bit about 52. You want to tell us more?
I have very few recollections. The thing is, this may be hard to understand, but from my looking back at my life, especially the very younger years, I was not in my body for a lot of times. I have very spotty memories of me coming back and, well, what am I doing here? And suddenly I'm there, and and the rest of the time, I don't know where I was. Difficult to explain, but I don't have those memories. I have very few memories of that period of time until I was probably 16 or 17. Few. And truly my where I became anchored as myself was after I went into the service in 1967 and went to boot camp. I went back to Chicago for schooling, and that's where I really finally came into myself. And from then on, I have those memories, but I had experiences even then that are difficult to describe, but they have nothing to do with my dad. It's just, that was my life. But yeah, I can't tell you a lot about this.
That's interesting.
I remember friends, and like I say, I remember meeting people. The dining room table was a center of my memories. The dining room table with Dr. Morgan from Conway, who was an optometrist and who came to our house frequently. People like Harold Thibodeau and his wife were instrumental in helping us grow up. Things like that I remember, and all those conversations with people whose names I can't even remember. There was a lady from Australia that came and actually stayed with us because the center was full, and she was a very physical person. She was.
Remember that?
You remember that?
Wasn't Irene Coneybear, was it?
It might well have been. Here again, I don't remember names, but she wanted me to go out early in the morning with her and run down the road, and she would skip rope. She was fabulous. She said, now you should do it. Well, I couldn't do it. She said, well, all you have to do is lift your feet. But every time I'd lift my foot, I'd lift my whole leg. It was going very awkward like this. She said, no, you can't lift your leg, just your feet. I couldn't do it. But I remember people like that, and they had huge influence on me. Otto Trogel from Florida would come up, and they would table tip at the house in the evenings after I went to bed. The kids were in bed, and they were out there in the living room. If there's anyone here that wishes to contact us. And I could hear the table going, and I'm laying there, and I'm watching, and I can remember one night looking through the door at the hallway that leads to the living room, and I see this form go down through the hallway. And they're in there just, that didn't last a whole long time.
Thankfully.
Thankfully, yeah.
I remember them looking for auras.
Yeah, looking at auras.
Their head.
Did that. And Harold Thibodeau had one of the original, what is it called? Hubbard meters.
E-meter.
The E-meter. And Dad would go back and sit in Dr. Thibodeau's office, and he would put him in almost a trance and take him back to regress into past lives. I remember that.
Dr. Morgan still has that.
Yeah, Dr. Morgan at Myrtle Beach Chiropractic still has the E-meter.
That was the Thibodeau's office and home right there.
Dad loved that. Dr. Thibodeau told him that he was, in his past life, he was César Franck, the organist that was the organist at one of the cathedrals in Paris and was run over by a horse and carriage when he was like 36 or something. And that explained why Dad, supposedly his karma, he could be such a good driver. He was, I mean, he never had an accident, ever. He was the chauffeur for the mayor of Schenectady and then driving instructor at Myrtle Beach High, but when he drove, you were in safe hands. Nothing would ever happen. Possibly Carmen. But anyway. Any more before we wind up?
I'm just curious, how was he brought up? What kind of a life?
His mother was Unitarian. They lived in Schenectady at one olden place. His father was an insurance salesman for New York Life.
He was not an only child.
Oh no, he had two brothers, George and Charlie. And Charlie was kind of a surprise later on in life. But for most of the period that I remember, my dad's father, my grandfather, Frank, Sr., was on the road as an insurance salesman all the way up and down the East Coast. He was, and I don't know religiously what my grandfather was, but he was a 33rd degree Mason. And my grandmother was not a greatly religious person, but she was Unitarian by religion.
And he was married before, and I in my mind, I think he left because he wanted to be at the center.
He actually brought his first wife down, and she didn't like it here very much. And so they went back, but he said, this is what I want to do. And so they split up. They had no children.
He had already met Baba by that time. He had met Baba?
I don't believe he had met Baba, no, but he had corresponded with Baba and through Darwin and memories. Yes?
Yeah, I just want to remind myself of the nice times I had with your mom, too. Both your mom and dad, they were a little bit like second parents to me when I came down to visit here. It was a little bit of a home away from the center, just like the hot sauce.
As different as they were, as different as my mother and father were in their upbringing and in their beliefs, they actually intermeshed perfect.
Very loving.
Yeah.
They complemented each other.
They complemented each other. Mother was the first one to tell me, "Oh, I think that this is a prison planet," and we're incurables brought to this planet. That's how human race came to be here. But she also believed that she would leave her body and go and save souls with flying saucer people. She was very unique. I have a lot more stories about Mom than I have about Dad, let me tell you.
What about, I've heard a story where, like, Elizabeth was coming around the center and Frank was chatting with fellow workers, and he said she was coming or heard her driving up, and he jumped in the closet. And
I don't doubt that.
She took her time. She came into the cabin and she was checking the silverware and everything. She might have known he was in the closet, you know.
It's probably, she probably did, yeah.
Her
Her timing was always impeccable, really.
I think I heard that story. I think there's some truth to that.
Mom did get Elizabeth one time. It had to do with Niecy's first car. First she and Mom went down and she picked out this blue 62 Chevrolet, but it was a manual transmission. And Niecy couldn't quite master that. But in the meanwhile, Niecy had to go back to New York to take care of some business or something. So she parked the car in the garage right straight out the front door from where they have the firewood now. But I think it was only one hole for a car then. May have been more, I don't remember. And Mom had the key, and Mom was giving Niecy driving lessons. So Mom was, responsible for the car. But anyway, Mom went by there one day to check on the car and saw it had been moved. It was sticking out farther or something like that, or it was crooked in the slot. So Mom straightened it up, and then she checked on it later and it had been moved again. I guess she never thought to look at the odometer, but she did notice it had been moved. So she called the Aruba and talked to Elizabeth. Said, you know, there's this car, someone's using this car, and you're like, no, Irene, no one's using that car. So Mom said, yes, it is. I came by there, and it's been moved. And Elizabeth said, well, I went in there to get something out of the shed, and I just shoved it over with my body. Mom said, Elizabeth, you know, that's a bunch of hooey. And someone there has a key to this car, and I want it. I'm coming to get it right now. And she left and drove down there. Well, she's coming up the steps to Aruba. The door flings open, an arm comes out with a key. Blink. Never saw anybody. Didn't see who it was. Mom got the key back. And I'm sure Elizabeth knew not to mess with my mother.
What did your mother think of Baba, do you know?
Oh,
Depends on what day it was.
yeah, well, she was raised in a very, at first she told me she liked Baba. She was drawn to him. And everybody has a different path. But Mom came from a very, very strict Methodist and Baptist background. Many of her uncles and her great-grandfather and grandfather, they were all ministers. But in the South, and this still happens these days, there's still people who follow this. There's a hierarchy. The men are better than the women, and the women are supposed to be somewhat servitude to the men, subservient to the men. So Mom could never quite grasp that. She didn't like that. She chafed at that. She couldn't figure out why. She could work in the field like a man behind a plow with a mule pulling it, or the other end of a cross-cut saw, and chop, split wood, stack it, and take it up for them to use, and do anything a man could do. Yet, she wasn't good enough to sit down at the table with them and eat. That's on Sunday dinner. She said we'd leave church on Sunday, and the women all had to rush home. The children, the wives, all scattered like leaves of the wind. They had to get home, get Sunday dinner ready for the men. The men would just, you know, yappity-yap amongst themselves, and finally come wandering in the house later on after checking the fields or whatever. And they ate at the dining table, and you didn't touch that food. You put it out there and let the men get what they wanted. And then once they'd had their fill, you take it in the kitchen, and they ate in the kitchen. And that really, really upset my mother. And you couldn't make deals, any kind of financial arrangements with a woman, and they were just like, you know, when I painted the picture, you get the fit. That's the way it was. My mother didn't like that at all. So,
and still is in some areas.
Yeah, they still do. I think Teddy Hux's family does that. But anyway, yeah. So Mom heard of Baba and how loving he was, and well, there's no rules like that, so on and so forth. So at first she said she was attracted to him, but I think later on the grinding poverty we grew up in and the sacrifices we have to make, because you had 3 little children living in a fixed-up gas station with 1 bedroom. 2 double beds, no shower, we had a metal shower stall on the back porch. We outgrew the kitchen sink.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, it was very tough. I can remember Mom and Dad in 1 bed, John and I in another bed, and you had a single bed because you were like 13 or 14.
Well, it was Jean's bed.
Yeah, but I don't even remember Jean living home, but yeah, it was difficult. And an old oil heater, you have to turn it off at night, unless pipes would freeze, because it was just too expensive. We couldn't afford the oil at 11 cents a gallon to keep the heater on.
Should you blame Baba for that? Is that?
No, it was just very hard dealing with. Dad was always the way, he didn't let things bother him so much. But Mom she was cooking for us, washing our clothes, and all these different things, and you know, scrounging here and there, cleaning up people's houses for a little extra money. I can remember in 7th grade, I had 3 outfits, and they were all the same. They were just a different color.
So she felt that Mayor Baba perpetuated father's unworldliness?
I don't believe that she blamed it on Bala. I
No.
think she probably blamed it more on Elizabeth Patterson
Yeah.
and Miss Kitty and the situation than
The
anything else.
situation of
But
it.
frustration exhibits itself in many different ways.
She never asked your father to leave Baba, did she?
Didn't she confront?
To the best of my knowledge, no, but she would encourage him to do certain things like, don't buy another instrument.
He'd hide them down both walls in the caretaker's cabin with musical instruments, you know.
Go ask for a raise. He wouldn't ask. He wouldn't ask.
Didn't she confront Elizabeth Patterson about that?
At I'm sure she did, probably more than once.
Invited her over for tea?
Yeah, she did do that.
Actually, Darwin Shaw interceded a couple of times saying, Elizabeth, you need to treat Frank better. You need to do this and do that. And of course, sometimes it would work and sometimes it wouldn't. But overall, Dad would never say anything because Dad wanted to be where he was and doing what he was. Yes, Jerry?
Didn't Elizabeth come to your house one time because?
Yeah, Mom invited her there for lunch to show her how we were living, and she said, I had no idea, Irene, I'll take care of this, and that's how we got that room.
That's how we got the money.
Put a room on
for the bedroom.
And put a tub extension.
And for a shower on the back porch.
So we got that. But,
it wasn't her fault that she was, Elizabeth Patterson was royalty. Elizabeth Patterson's family were incomparably rich and had no conception of how.
She grew up in the Gilded Age, 1890, 1900, you know, huge mansions up in Chicago. Philip Armour was her father.
So you can't blame her for not understanding what we were doing and how we were living.
She had no conception of what those people did.
And it wasn't her fault.
But didn't Baba also indicate what she should be paying people and so on?
I don't know,
Okay.
Jerry. I truly don't know. It's possible.
They did run it by him, yes. I have a piece of correspondence saying so. Right, in 1957 or 58, he was going to make $1.25 an hour. So, with 50 cents an hour extra or something for being the night watchman, it really wasn't much.